Welcome. Today's project's on how to tell you are being the victim in this anxiety journey you are currently on. Now, anxiety sufferers run the same limiting patterns every day unconsciously. And so when we can recognize the patterns that are only supporting your poor limiting beliefs, then we can work on changing those patterns and thus changing your character. Because anxiety recovery is all about moving towards that ideal you. What is that ideal you? You have to first understand and construct that ideal person that you want to become. You want to become more neutral in your emotions. You want to become less sensitized to the world around you. You want to release stored baggage from your past. You want to be a social butterfly and interact with all sorts of people. You want to travel. So, how do we get from being that anxious person to that ideal person you only dreamed about? Well, one of the first steps is recognizing what you do daily that's only supporting your limiting beliefs and patterns. And once you recognize the patterns that only support this anxious identity, you can work on shifting those patterns, doing the opposite. And when you start to move in a different direction and start to correct these limiting patterns, then new neuronal pathways start to strengthen within the brain. What happens? Well, you start to think differently. You start to be someone completely different, and then people around you in your life, family, friends, will start to notice, wow, you're really changing. You never used to do those kinds of things. And that's the path that you need to go down. So let's get into the 5 ways to tell you're playing the victim. Number 5 is spending too much time in your safe zone. Now, you may be at home a lot of the time making excuses to not go into work. You may be making excuses to avoid a get together. You may be making up excuses not to go to the shopping mall, right? These little things only strengthen your fear of the unknown, because that's what it is to you. That shopping mall, that job, that doctor's appointment, those are chaotic situations, and you don't want to face that. That's only going to cause you dread. But that's your limiting perspective over it. Once you do face those situations and venture into the unknown, you're going to realize that, wait, I can in fact do it. I'm not going to fall down dead in this shopping mall. I actually survived. And once you prove to yourself that you can survive in these situations, that strengthens a new pathway within the brain. And each time you go into this unknown, anxious situation, you're going to feel braver. And that's the process to recovering from anxiety, to feel braver than you once were. So, anxiety recovery is about seeing the other side of the coin. There's 2 sides. Anxiety sufferers see one side, but there's actually another side. And that brings us into number 4, avoiding eye contact and poor posture. Now, I put these 2 together because they kind of go hand in hand. These are actions that anxiety sufferers most commonly do, and I used to do on a day-to-day basis. I avoided eye contact. I was hunched over and I didn't want people to see me, and I would mind read, They probably think I'm weak, or they probably think I'm unhealthy or ugly, whatever it is. But I would avoid eye contact because of the shame, because of the guilt. And the poor posture only supports my anxious identity. So when you're walking around and you have poor posture, that's only going to send the wrong signals to your brain. You want to send the right signals. When you sit up straight with your shoulders back, you send different signals to your brain. You're telling yourself that, I'm vulnerable, but I'm confident, because your chest is out, because this area, the throat, the chest, these are vulnerable places of the body. So, but when you show that, and when you stand up straight, you're actually sending different signals to the brain. You're showing your old self, the one that's hunched over, that I can in fact take on the day. I can in fact face this chaos that is in front of me. That's what you want to do. You want to face that chaos. But when you start to practice and better posture, you start to act like someone else. Remember, do things that your old self didn't do, right? You want to do things that support this new ideal you. Number 3 is you butt all over yourself. You use but all the time. My doctor says I'm healthy, but the pain is still there. It's probably a disease. But what if it's cancer? What if it's kidney disease? What if it's a brain tumor? So, like I said before, anxiety sufferers only see one side of the coin. Flip it over and say, what else could this sensation mean? Instead of always looking on the negatives. But it could be a tumor. But I'm going to have a panic attack, so why bother? And then you avoid that situation. Do you see how all of these things are connected? You say, but I'm just going to be socially anxious, so I don't want to go to that get together. So then you stay at home in your safe zone and you don't face that unknown, that chaos, because that's where the answers lie. Do you remember King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table? To look for the Holy Grail, they each looked in the forest that's most darkest to them. The darkest part of the forest they looked, because they knew the answers were in the part of the forest that were darkest, the scariest, the deepest, the most chaotic places in the forest. That's where you will find the gold. But if you avoid that dragon's lair, if you avoid that scary forest, you're not going to prove yourself. You're not going to prove to yourself that you are in fact brave and that you can survive. Number 2 is constantly thinking about the negative. So this goes hand in hand with the third one. Anxiety sufferers always look at the negatives. They always see the negatives in other people. So they always complain about that coworker. They always complain about their situation in life, how crappy their day is. That's why one great thing to do when recovering from anxiety is removing those negative friends. Removing those negative friends, because they only support your anxious identity. So are you constantly complaining about how crappy the weather is? Are you constantly complaining about your workload or how you look and how ugly you look? When I started to flip the coin over and challenge myself, you know what? Today I'm going to look at the positives. Those shoes that person's wearing, I like the color of their shoes. Or I like that dress that person's wearing. You know, their sunglasses are really cool. You know, I really enjoy my time alone in the evening, and I like to enjoy a good book. So it's kind of like, well, it's flipping the coin over, but it's working on looking at the positives throughout the day rather than the negatives. Now, number one is constantly seeking reassurance. Very, very common. Are you constantly seeking reassurance from other people? You may be at home all the time talking about your illness and how you went on Google and you found out that it's a tumor, and now you're hanging around your loved ones because you want to feel safe. You want them to tell you that everything is okay. Or you constantly telling coworkers that, you know, I got this headache that's been here for a week and it's probably a brain tumor, and you're constantly expressing those horrific thoughts, those catastrophic thoughts that you constantly keep ruminating over daily to other people. You keep them close. And when you keep these people close, what happens? Well, you kind of rely on them. So you become dependent on them. So how are you going to get to that ideal you when you're constantly dependent on the words from other people that are close to you? That is something worth thinking about. How are you going to become independent? And how are you going to get to that ideal you if you're constantly dependent on the reassurance from other people? The goal is to prove to your old self that you are in fact safe, that you can survive, and that the sensation is in fact safe and not life-threatening. Go out into the unknown, challenge yourself, stimulate new pathways, and move yourself away from that old you. Attach pleasure to change, pleasure to reaching that ideal you, and pain to staying in that anxious identity. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's video. Remember, do not let anxiety define who you are, and I will see you on the next video.